along. Thank you for that kind introduction. Great to be here. Gareth Evans, congratulations on your honour. Great to have you here. Sid, thank you for hosting this event and all your work. I didn't realise you'd done more than a decade. Congratulations on that. They say the second 10 years is the harder one than the first, but congratulations. Thank you for your leadership and obviously great to be here. So important with Asialink and the role it provides on bringing us together. And it's never been more important, I think, than right now. So thank you for the opportunity to come along. Great to have Barry O'Farrell here, my good friend, the former Premier, and people probably don't realise this, but in terms of the connection back into Asia, my strong assessment was before Barry O'Farrell became Premier, it had been drifting, and that's a kind word for using it in terms of the New South Wales government's approach. Barry understood very clearly how important it was, and he not only pursued it, he passionately pursued it, the engagement directly across government, built relationships, and I believe has put huge momentum into the New South Wales relationships across Asia, and we're very indebted to him. So great to have him here, as well as Nihal, who helped him with part of that as well. So great to have Barry here as well. And friends, and there's many Consul Generals that are down here. Great to have our friends, the Consul Generals that are here. If you want to learn how to party, come to the Consul Generals. They are great. They are great partiers. They look so professional and so unassuming, but I tell you what, ask them their tricks later. So great to have you here. Thank you for coming along and what you do in promoting relationship with Asia here in New South Wales. This is unusual because it's a business, and in terms of it's a dinner, and the last thing anyone wants at dinner, I know you're looking at it, you're thinking, he's not, is he? He's not going to do PowerPoint. Please do not do PowerPoint. I can see it, I know. But look, this is going to be a great PowerPoint. So you're going to love it. So there's a few things I do want to go through. I'll promise to be quick and then happy to take questions and answer. We can enjoy the evening. But look, there are some exciting things to run through. If I am too long, just stand up and walk out. But promise me, I'll be quick. I really wanted to get this sense, and everyone here knows it, but the numbers are unbelievable in terms of the emergence of Asia. And any government, and indeed any business that doesn't see some of these numbers and doesn't act, well, they're not doing their job. And I think you'll agree with me. The growth in the global economy, it's been well spoken. If you go back to 2000, which is the light blue, the economy was obviously strongly west. So the US and Europe dominated the world. That's shifting. And it's shifting to Asia in an unbelievable way. By the time we get to 2020, close to 40% of the economy is going to be in Asia. A huge shift, and that's something that we all have to focus on. There's many things on this chart, but it's very powerful because it shows the emergence of the Asian middle class. Now, if you go back to 2008, it was about 23%, but where it's expected to get to in 2030 is close to 60%. So there is this massive shift and emergence of the Asian middle class, and the size and quantum is incredible. On the right-hand side, it shows the consumption patterns. Without running through in individual detail, noting it's dinner, you can see that the discretionary spend in terms of recreation, transport or travel, and education, that is where the big increase is coming. So the emerging middle class that's coming through in Asia, that discretionary spend is a huge driver. And obviously that is something I'll talk about in a minute on where I think New South Wales has a real competitive advantage. The economy, and obviously that demand for services, which is coming out of the middle class, well, we're very well positioned. We've moved from the mining boom, which is obviously on the left, much more to a post, and it's much more service-led. So the services are now sort of dominating rather than the mining investment, and as you can see, that has shifted the concentration of economic growth towards particularly New South Wales, but and Victoria. So that positions us very well, I think. Because what does that mean then for New South Wales as part of the overall? And I think we have very significant competitive advantages, and we have been honing in on those. In real sense, on the left-hand side, you can see in terms of exports, exports of services across Australia, it's about 20%. but in New South Wales it's 40%. New South Wales accounts for about 55% of all Australia's services exports. So we're well positioned in terms of what we are offering in our economy, the skills and the businesses sort of underpinning it. So New South Wales is very well positioned in that. The demand for agriculture, again, I think this is something that hasn't been done enough in terms of actually understanding what this means here in New South Wales and across the country. But the demand for food is going to grow between 2007 is the number, but to 2050 by about 80%. So there's this massive growth in demand for agricultural products. And of course, the main catalyst of that, which is on the right-hand side, is as consistent with that middle class and the population growth, is in Asia. So we have incredible agricultural opportunities. We have this massive emergence of population and requirements. And again, I think we're very well positioned on that. This is, again, understood, but I don't think understood well enough. And I recently led a delegation into Asia in terms of our investment management. And I think this is where we really can grow. What's known is Australia's a big player, but I'm not sure whether everyone knows that we're actually the largest in Asia in terms of investment management skills and capabilities, of which there are many players here. But, you know, relative to our peers, so using Singapore, in terms of the funds under management here, notwithstanding the huge capability we have, there's only 5% that are external funds under management here, whereas in Singapore it's 80%. So the expectation, if you again go back to that emerging middle class, well, our products, we've got the skills, the capability to play a huge role, I think, in the emergence of that middle class. So again, huge capability. Education, it's huge and massive in terms of the relationship ongoing. There's been lifelong relationships with educational institutions directly and a focus of various governments. And Barry certainly saw this continually in his trips. But it's huge in terms of the size. New South Wales has the largest number of enrolments. We are the third largest in the world in terms of international enrolments. It's quite an interesting position for a relatively small country. That's how much we are punching above our weight. It creates about $7 billion in export revenue here and close to 50,000 jobs. So it's a huge and growing. And as you can see, a lot of those partnerships already are into Asia and across all parts of Asia. So that's something we have to focus very strongly on, but already in place. That's one of the great things. And recently in India, who have a huge infrastructure program underway. We've got a number of agreements we've signed in terms of training the skills required to help with that construction, with that infrastructure, and it's logical. You know, we have the skills and the education, the training capability that helps facilitate one of our large training partners deliver one of the massive programs, one of the biggest infrastructure programs in the world. So again, it's an impact that we can follow. Tourism, and again, often tourism is spoken about, but you know, my strong sense on this is it's not something you can take for granted. It doesn't just happen. I think we have to be much more purposeful, and internally we've discussed, well, what does it actually look like to facilitate and to go after and be more aggressive in securing this growth in tourism that is inevitable and is happening before us. At the moment, 8 of the 10 fastest growing markets, tourism markets to us, out of Asia. It's a huge trend. And as you can see, the US, traditional markets, UK, across Europe, very limited. So how do we continue that and how do we capture our greatest amounts? I mean, the size is huge. Chinese travel spending is going to go up to $450 billion by 2025. That's huge. At the moment, we've got about $9 billion. That's across Australia. So that's a massive opportunity that we have to be much more purposeful about. But we can't forget our long-term trade links, and this is something that everyone here is very familiar on. And in business, you understand, you know, what are some of the relationships you have and how do you use those to engender shareholder value, to deliver for customers. And it's no different. You know, we have some very strong and powerful trade links with Asia, and we need to understand those, respect those, reflect on them and ensure that we use them to grow. Here in New South Wales, we've got long-standing sister state relationships. And the first ever that was signed in China was with President Xi Jinping's father, who is in that photo, with Neville Wran. And as you can see, Neville Wran looks quite dapper there, really. So it looks disinterested, though, on my point, but he wasn't. But that agreement, as many here will know, is viewed very powerfully within China. There's a great respect that comes, understanding the importance of being the first agreement with Guangdong, and that is obviously the economic driver in many respects of the Chinese economy. And building upon that is something that we have tried to do. That picture there is with Governor Zhu, and he was coming out celebrating the 35th anniversary. So as part of that celebration, he became the first Chinese leader ever to address the New South Wales Parliament. So building on the relationships and the culture and the history, I think is very important. And again, it's across Asia. A very strong relationship into Seoul, Jakarta, Maharashtra, in India, and Tokyo. And making sure that they're understood by governments in its entirety and leveraging those, I think, is very important. We've gone to a new level. I won't spend too long on the FTAs because everyone here, I'm sure, is very familiar. But this takes the relationships to the next level, and it's very well understood. I think the current federal government's done an outstanding job across these. We're very close to India, but signed agreements across, obviously, Korea, Japan, and China, making sure that all of our businesses are aware exactly on those opportunities, coinciding with government support. This is a time where both ways we should see massive, massive growth, and we're already seeing it across agricultural sectors, the wine industry, tourism and others, and there's big financial opportunities as well. So that is an exciting time. It is an exciting time. The expectation, and there's all types of modelling, but $24 billion in terms of GDP increase on the back of those free trade agreements. My argument is pretty simple. I want New South Wales to have more than its fair share. Let's aggressively pursue it. And what they expect us to grow, well, let's try and double it, because this is a rare time and we should be maximising it. We also can't forget that there are many other parts of the relationship, and I think some of the things that go behind the scenes in many respects are as important as the big trade delegations that are led. The HANDA, the opera on Sydney Harbour. I mean, it's a magnificent event. And even I've been, I wouldn't call myself an opera fan, but I do many things for my wife. And going to opera is one of them. If you see me at an opera event, please say, well done, Mike. You're taking one for the team. But look, that is spectacular. Someone that's not really an opera fan, the HANDA opera is magnificent, and it's viewed very powerfully in Japan. The Bangarra Dance Company, many might not even had the opportunity to see them. They have many fantastic visits across Asia, China in particular. But a big tourer, very well respected, connecting into some of our culture and a greater understanding of who we are and obviously our history. The Sydney Symphony Orchestra, again, is a big player. Diwali, another big opportunity, and indeed putting the Diwali colours on the Opera House, viewed very powerfully, together with Chinese New Year as well. So all of these are things that we should be facilitating and growing. I mean, that's what relationships do. You do things together, you share the best of the best, your culture, your history, your interests, and that has been an important part. It can't just be about how do we get that economic opportunity and bring it here. It has to be holistic, every part of the relationship. And the migration is huge. What's coming, the fastest growing groups are all from Asia. China and India is not going to surprise, but Philippines, Korea as well, and Nepal. Interesting. So all of those groups are the largest growing groups that we have from a migration point of view coming into New South Wales. So the question is, where to the future? And there's just a few slides I want to go through here. because once we understand the economic opportunities, we understand the depth of the relationship and the trade, but what's next? You know, how can we sort of shift it to the next level? And part of that is understanding the growth. And if you look at this, there are 10 priority markets that we've identified with the highest growth potential. The red are all Asia, so 7 out of the 10 across Asia. And the 4 largest trading partners are the ones that have been identified with the most opportunity, which is China, Japan, Korea, and India. And interestingly, the USA, which is still very significant in size, is shifting in terms of the growth. So very clearly, anyone that was looking on where would you focus, well, that sort of top quartile on the right is where you'd put everything or most of your attention to. We understand that our proportion of goods and exports are huge. So we expect close to 100% growth in the next 10 years in terms of exports from New South Wales, Asian proportion of exports. It's about 50% across Australia. And in terms of the foreign direct investment, it's 5.5 times larger than 5 years ago, about 24%. And we've seen that increasingly. The foreign direct investment is coming in all types of different forms, sort of actually. So whether it be investment in the Newcastle port, investment in some of our largest infrastructure programs, it is certainly very significantly increasing in Japan in particular. A number of corporate players that have been investing heavily. So it's a huge movement in the foreign direct investment. And that's part of the investing in our state and future. This is sort of showing the percentage you can see in terms of the foreign direct investment. If you go back to 2001, I think it is, 2001, you can see Asia was a relatively small part. It's now shifted to the point that it's almost the EU, which is largely the UK in terms of direct investment. For the first time, Asia has gone past the UK and the EU. So the size and quantum, we know the trends have been happening, but they're actually reaching very significant milestones. So it's showing how big that investment is becoming, and it's only going to increase exponentially. We also need to ensure, and you probably can't make much of that, but it's showing in many respects the next part, so innovation and how important that is. And Sydney, New South Wales kind of sits about 16th in the world. Our target is to become top 10, but we're 3rd in Asia. So if you go back to the statistics where I spoke about the size and quantum of the economy and where it was coming, if we get the innovation and the startup and the technology space right, well, we can really play a leading role. And we already have partnerships across Asia. As an example, our fintech startup is about to have a number of Chinese companies come and participate down here. We are launching similarly some of ours to other parts across Asia. So those connections, I think, are going to be critical. And if we get it right, it's going to be a very powerful mix for the economy here and the economy overall. The fintech markets I've spoken about, Australia is 3rd. Again, that's a competitive advantage we can't lose. Already we rely heavily on our financial services. The emergence of fintech is both an opportunity and a threat. I mean, it's a threat that if fintech takes over and we're not participating, well, financial services dilutes. But if we leverage the size and power of our financial services sector with the emerging technology, we're in a very good place. And at the moment, that's where we are. But again, we can't be complacent in relation to that. The MedTech centre is huge. That has grown mammoth over the last 5 years, about 160%, and it will continue to grow. Think about the demographics that I've spoken about, and particularly in China, that top portion on the right shows the growing population above 65 in China. Medical technology, if we get that right, the requirements, health requirements for that demographic, not just in China but across Asia, is something where I expect to see huge growth. And already, companies such as ResMed and Cochlear were already advanced in the medical technology space, but there's a huge amount of work that's going on there. You can't underestimate the importance of being an R&D hub, and Sydney is now number 5 in the world. And it'll continue to grow. It's not complicated. The easier it is to trade and to move capital, more will be done, and it's cheaper and more efficient, and we're seeing that again. On a relative scale, we still have much more work to do, but it is a big competitive advantage that as these relationships are growing, we need to take advantage of. And this is the last one, so that's the good news. Jobs for New South Wales. So how do you grow in a way that's a bit more strategic than we have in the past? And one of the things that government has done, it has just responded reactively to companies that want to move here, so whether it be Asian companies looking to have headquarters here or international companies more broadly, and they've looked for just incentives, payroll tax style incentives, and that's a good thing. But what we have done has become, I think, much more strategic. So we've modelled this, we've pulled all of that money together over 4 years, created a $200 million fund, and we've got an external board to come in led by David Thodey, ex-Telstra, and said, okay, we want to invest in our competitive advantages, our key trade partners, and how do we use this money to grow the jobs into the economy. So using the example I give of tourism, so how can we facilitate that tourism by selectively potentially using some of these funds to facilitate and grow into our key competitive advantages. So like any business, what are our competitive advantages? Education, tourism, financial services, agriculture, technology. How do we facilitate those and continue to grow the links between us and Asia at the same time, grow our economy in a way that leads not just the country, but is one of the leading economies across the Asia Pacific. So that is certainly something that we will be working hard on and engaging very much with our partners across Asia. So look, in conclusion, I certainly think, as I said at the outset, this is such an important time. I don't think previously we've ever been in a position where the economic growth was what it's going to be, as in almost exponential in terms of the growth and the opportunities, coupled with the formalisation of free trade agreements. So there's an alignment in terms of opportunities for both, together with the history of relationships that we have. And I think looking at our competitive advantages, where those growth opportunities are coming, New South Wales is incredibly well positioned, as is Australia. And I think we will look back on the next 5 years as some of the most significant in the relationship between Australia and Asia. And obviously I view New South Wales as the portal into Australia. So it's fantastic to be here with you tonight. Thank you for everyone that's involved in facilitating the relationship, but I really think that Asialink, in terms of its role, its function, its focus, I think they are doing absolutely everything right in taking advantage of this unique time. And certainly as the leader of a government in this state, we will do everything possible to ensure that New South Wales participates in a way that hasn't been done before. So thank you. So you want to stand here? Okay.
Thank you, Premier, for that wonderfully insightful address. I have to say that was the best PowerPoint presentation I've ever seen over dinner, so well done. Premier, thank you also for agreeing to take a few questions. Now, before I go to the floor for some questions, I might kick things off with a question. Our chief scientist, Alan Finkel, launched a very influential report a couple of weeks ago on the impact that the Asian diasporas or communities can have on Australia's economic advantage. And one of the architects of that report, Dr. Malian Kunga, is actually in this room. Now, Sydney is one of Australia's most multicultural cities, and there are many thriving Asian communities throughout the state. You've touched briefly in your presentation about the migrant groups from different countries in Asia. What role do you see these dynamic communities can play in New South Wales' international engagement strategy?
Yeah. Well, why don't we get Marlene to answer that question?
I think Marlene wants to hear from you, Premier.
Well, it's because it's huge. I think the flows in terms of relationship and families and the migration is how you expand the relationship. So very clearly, I mean, the growth we've seen, particularly from China, but also from India and other sort of groups as I outlined, that is the precursor to significant growth. So we are seeing many businesses established on the back of those groups, and the trade opportunities growing exponentially. But the power comes because who is going to be interested in engaging in New South Wales? Well, if you have family members that are here or friends that you are aware are here, well, all of a sudden the interest is heightened and the opportunities become much more seriously considered. Like anything, if there's a personal relationship and a personal connection, well, there's going to be much more likelihood of exponential growth. So that's why seeing those numbers in terms of the migration, they're exciting because that's exactly what the precursor to some of the growth to come is.
Great. Thank you, Premier. I'm sure Alan Finkel and Dr. Kanga will be very pleased with your interview. I might now go to the audience for a couple of questions, and can I please ask for you to state your name and your organisation before your questions to the Premier?
But don't feel obliged, you know.
There's one here at the DFAT table. Do we have?
Thank you, Premier. And as the mother of a 12-year-old girl, I've been taking notes about the scenarios to avoid for future reference. But I think there's brand New South Wales and there's brand Australia, and there's a lot of synergy between the two. How do you strike the balance in promoting brand New South Wales versus brand Australia in the investments that you decide to make?
You know, look, it's a very good question, and it's one that we have actually wrestled with because from an Asia point of view, relationship point of view, obviously Australia is Australia. You know, we sort of carve ourselves up into state territories, and which is a good thing, but it does create a confusion in terms of the marketing proposition internationally. So we sort of try and talk about Australia, but just show the Harbour Bridge and the Opera House. And you don't want to go anywhere else, so you might as well come here and it's all done, and we can deal with Australia. No, so that, in all seriousness, that's probably the way. I mean, of course I will talk about New South Wales, but often internationally we'll talk about Australia as a whole, but obviously the key things that we want to focus on and where they are. So I think you want to supplement. So obviously Tourism Australia and the federal government do a lot in terms of promoting the nation and everything that is going, but then underlying the specific opportunities we have in our state. So, you know, we have differences obviously in terms of tourism, we have differences in terms of education, agriculture, so it's honing in on those. But you have to be mindful of that because you don't want to confuse the overall message. So we probably more talk about Sydney and Australia rather than necessarily the New South Wales story. So.
There's a question at the back.
Good evening, Mr. Premier. My name is Michael Guo. I'm from Visionary Investment Group. After closely watching every slides you put up, I really think if there's anyone deserves the name of visionary, it should be you, leading us to see where the state is headed for the next 5 or potentially 10 years, taking advantage of the growth middle class from Asia, particularly in China. So that was really insightful. And we know sometime last year, the Victorian government has put on increased stamp duty for foreign buyers buying the Australian property. Finally, we have seen action from your office doing the same. So good on you putting on those extra charges. We know from the TV ads that there will be extra 1 million people coming to live in this city in the next 10 years. So that applied by the new rule, I think that's tens of billions of dollars for this state alone. So I just wanted to add to what you just pictured over there. So
I'll tell the Treasurer, you're very pleased.
So all jokes aside, seriously, you know, that action plan really created a lot of interest, a lot of buzz around the community, especially in the industry. So a lot of people have been talking, so I wanted to ask the question on behalf of those who are interested. Are your government, especially in this election time, have any plans to put similar measures to charge more foreign tax to foreigners, for example, landing in our busiest airport in the country, or taking off, or staying at our hotels, occupying our hotel rooms? For those students coming over here, taking tuitions, learning from our universities, taking on the seats in the classroom, how about charging them? We know there are more coming. We know in the next 10 years we can even get more, those dollars from those people. So is there any plans, doing the same foreign tax in those regards?
Yeah, you really should meet with the Treasurer.
Last time I checked, I thought he was working for you.
No, she is, yes. Look, I mean, it's an important point because, one of the challenges you want, and you saw some of the slides in terms of foreign direct investment, you want the environment to be as welcoming as foreign capital as possible, and you don't want disincentives there. So actually, the decision that we made in terms of the real estate purchases was one looking both across the country and across the world. So if there are foreigners that are buying real estate in various jurisdictions around the world, there is some form of charge in most jurisdictions, whether it be the UK, whether it be Hong Kong or Singapore, our neighbours to the south, as in Victoria, Queensland. So we looked at various jurisdictions, and yes, we put in an increased charge, but really that's while our revenue is weakening, so there's revenue weakening across other things, and that really is the sole focus of it. So it's not an intent of trying to take those funds. Yes, there's a contribution that helps us to go to the bottom line, to help us with the services, with the additional population growth. But I'm very mindful in terms of foreign capital, we want to attract as much as possible. And the migration, very much keen to support that because that is clearly linked to growth and the economic growth that we need. So there's no plans to go further, as you articulated, but we will always look for those sort of opportunities. Clearly, if we have students coming to our public schools, there already is amounts that are recouped for those international students in our public schools. So there are some measures in place, but my strong desire, Sydney is the global city of the country. We want to do everything we can to attract global investment. So that's how the policy parameters we put together.
Well, thank you, Premier. In the interest of time, I might close the Q&A session there. I'd really like to thank you for the energy, the passion, and the vision, Premier, that you shared with us through your address. I had 3 very compelling takeaways through your presentation. First, that Asia is New South Wales's international priority in the 21st century, given the dominant proportion of goods and services exports and also FDIs from the region. Second, it's absolutely fascinating that not only is New South Wales the leading centre for what is now an innovation-driven economy, but not only is it the leading centre from a fintech perspective, but also from a medtech perspective. And it's absolutely astonishing that Sydney trails Bangalore so closely when one considers that India has just overtaken Israel as the 3rd most active place in the world for startups. And the hub for startup activity in India is Bangalore, and Sydney is so close to overtaking Bangalore. So your vision for Sydney to be in the top 10 in the world is just so achievable. Third, it's just so pleasing to see that the bedrock of economic engagement for this state is very much based on long-standing friendships as established through your sister state partnerships with Guangdong and Tokyo a good 30 years ago, through the more recent ones with such powerful states in India like Maharashtra. The emphasis on international education and tourism, Premier, should only help those people-to-people bonds to grow and for those friendships to grow. Premier, I am extremely confident that we will rise to your call for action to capture this great state's exceptional future with the region across political, economic, and cultural spheres. Thank you, Premier, for such an inspiring address.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Very